Hello and welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast. But as always, with a nostalgic twist as we look back at our favourite points in time of Spanish football and really get up inside the memories and basically think about football when it was really, really good. That's probably the simple way of putting it. Isn't it, Paul? How are you doing?
Absolutely, yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. It's incredibly warm at the moment in the exotic land of northwest England that you and I are currently residing in. It's we won't let the hot weather dampen our mood. And as we head into summer break, I'm looking forward to, I think, rounding things off this first stint with one of the most iconic moments in recent football for the nation of Spain. I think is fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Paul's alluded to there, this is our final episode of the season before we take a summer break and we come back in the new season with a whole new roster of episodes. And we've even dressed up for the occasion, haven't we, Paul? Both representing our respective Spanish clubs. You wearing a glorious Umbro Mallorca shirt and me wearing a glorious Umbro Malaga jacket. That's not dressing to impress. I do not know what is. But yes, Paul's already alluded to it there. We're going to be talking about possibly the biggest triumph ever in Spanish football history. And if you're listening to this on the day of release, which will be the 11th of July, 2025, it has been 15 years today since that Spain side lifted the World Cup in South Africa, possibly the best World Cup I've ever watched. And it basically just enshrined and encapsulated the dominance that the Spanish football side had back then, which maybe they're kind of seeing a bit of resurgence of now. But when we look at that team, Paul, it was absolutely incredible, wasn't it? And, rightly going into this World Cup as favourites, but they were just brilliant to watch as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's star-studded. I mean, we've talked about Galacticos at club level before, but I mean, this Spain team's another level, and it was kind of, the formation in a sense picked itself for Del Bosque. I'm not saying that he had an easy ride, or anything like that, but with the wealth of talent at his disposal, getting those players to work together, and the difficult thing is who to leave on the bench, because there's some phenomenal talent that barely gets a look in during this tournament, as we can get into a little bit. But yep, you're right. They enter the competition 2 years on from winning the 2008 European Championships, or the Euros, as we affectionately call them. And they'd been on a 35 match unbeaten run ahead of the tournament from 2007 to 2009. So tails up and feeling confident, I would say. And, just look at the squad list and why wouldn't you feel confident, let alone the incredible form that you're bringing into the campaign. Just look at the players that the coach has got to pick from.
Yeah, and it's always interesting as well, especially when we think of Vicente Del Bosque in terms of, he was a fantastic and well-respected manager in his own right before he became the national team manager. And I suppose there's a lot of parallels that you could draw between Spain and especially the English football team in terms of having that plethora of talent and trying to get it to gel, and then putting big names up, big homegrown names especially, to try and make it work. I'm talking like Hoddle and Venables and people like that from an England perspective. Del Bosque was very much in that mold, and but he just seemed to get something out of the Spanish side that no England manager got out of that golden generation, for example. And it was the hard choices. It was making those difficult choices to, we spoke about before we came on air, not having a preference towards Real Madrid or Barcelona. I think that was always a big stigma for the national team manager. But Del Bosque, despite being a former Real Madrid manager, basically threw that concept out the window and went, I'm just going to pick the best players that I've got who are in form at the moment and are some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens, to be that those or 8 of those players predominantly in the starting 11 all played for the same club, and it wasn't Real Madrid. I think it's there's obviously the talent that they individually have, but the majority of them, they have a system that they're familiar with as well. He predominantly relied on a 4-3-3 formation, and I think when we go through the names in a bit, you'll see why that kind of formation is just natural for them within it. The players that you've got. Um, I think should we set the scene a little bit more for the tournament itself, and sort of roll back to what the mood was like in the summer of 2010 when you and I were, much younger.
Yeah, we lads, as we say. I think we obviously mentioned before that this was one of my favourite World Cups ever to watch. Just from a neutral perspective, obviously, my nation did not make it to South Africa, despite my accent would suggest. But obviously, it was the first World Cup to happen in Africa. I remember watching this and all the stadiums popping up in like Cape Town and Johannesburg, and I remember Soccer City being like the place where they were basically saying the entire continent of Africa would gather to celebrate football, and there was a lot around it. I especially remember vuvuzelas. If you, I still hear them in my sleep, Paul. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, distinctive sound that I think is going to stick with anybody who watched that tournament forever. And also, like some people may know, I did spend some time a few years ago. I spent quite a period of time volunteering at the National Football Museum in Manchester. And in there, they do have a fair few artifacts actually from this World Cup, including referee Howard Webb's shirt, medal, and card from this final. But they also do have a vuvuzela, and I do remember at one period of time they had like a few, like they call them pop videos, don't you, where it's like a montage of things, and there was always a clip that had the buzzing sound of a vuvuzela, and that because it was showing the particular artifact, the Howard Webb stuff from the final of this World Cup. And the little clip of that match and him wearing it, and the sound of the vuvuzela was is distinctive. Like it's one of those warbling sounds that I think like it's one. It's kind of iconic, but like people hated it. It was like I thought it was all right. It's something that like I don't think I would want to sit in a stadium of 40 or 50 or 60,000 people and them all be doing it, but like on TV, it did sound like there was an atmosphere, and it was organic. It was unique. We'd not seen that sort of thing at World Cup before, and I would take the buzzing sound of a vuvuzela over those clappy things that Leicester City had any day of the week. And yeah, I thought it added to the vibe. I thought it was great. I mean, I'm sure everybody listening or watching this will know the sound that we're referring to, but I guess it kind of sounds like when you're on holiday in a warm place, like I don't know, let's say like south of Spain or the Canary Islands or somewhere like that, and you walk past like a swarm of crickets or not quite crickets, maybe grasshoppers or something like that. It's that like chorus of it was like that, wasn't it? And you could hear it for 90 odd minutes, like non-stop.
Yeah, it's not exactly like Barmy Army with the trumpets type thing. It's just everyone's just blowing into a vuvuzela at all times. And the thing is, it did create genuine atmosphere. Like we look at the Club World Cup at the moment, and we see empty stadiums wherever people's been played. This was the World Cup, and everyone was joining in South Africa, and obviously the local populace was really, really involved. And this was a a big part of their atmosphere. So it was it was brilliant that it was embraced. I remember some people coming back from South Africa, or their parents had been in South Africa for this, and they brought it to school, and they were playing at the playground. It was just mental when it comes to it. And there's so many other things really that actually with this World Cup, not that they were first. We had football songs, so like you say, there was always there was the England football song that we'd hear, but actually this was possibly the first time that we ever had like a World Cup song, which was we had Waka Waka with Shakira, I think was
friend of the podcast, Shakira. Yes.
Friend of the podcast, Shakira, big up. Down with Gerard Piqué. And, but we also had the waving flag as well by Kanan.
Kenan,
And
yes.
that was just everywhere, wasn't it? And if I remember right, that was a
Yeah.
Coca-Cola advert.
Well, yeah, but to be fair, like if you think, and if anybody, not to go off on too much of a tangent, if anybody ever read or has read the book "Fall of the House of FIFA" by David Kahn,
Mm.
he covers quite brilliantly the link that historically the FIFA World Cup, as it is known as TM, trademarked, whatever, the sort of synonymous relationship that the World Cup has had with certain sponsors. So Coca-Cola, I think Adidas, and
Yeah.
might be McDonald's is the other
McDonald's,
one.
yeah.
And there's been this historical sort of intertwining with the way that they campaign it, and it's like FIFA wanted it to be that when the World Cup's on, you can tell that the World Cup's on, even if you're not a football fan, because you'll hear a certain jingle or you'll see a certain advert for a certain brand. And likewise, some of these brands wanted you to know or think about their brand because you're watching the World Cup, even though
Yeah.
their logo may not be always, because sponsor. There's also this, and I'm going to fall down another tangent here, but like, there is this, obscure rule at the World Cup where sponsorship's not allowed on your shirts, but or anything like that. That's why the thing, like, FIFA tried to portray it as this sort of like pure, all about the football when you're on the pitch, except for the fact that the entire competition is funded by sponsors. Everything where around the pitch has got sponsors, so it's only FIFA's sponsors that are allowed. Nobody else's sponsors are allowed in through the door. But yeah, to go back to your point, I think it was from a Coca-Cola outfit.
It was. Well, just on that thread, like the mascots at every World Cup as well. You'd think if they were, team mascots or national team mascots, they'd be in like some kind of color scheme or jacket or shirt of the side at which they are working with. But obviously, because they tend to be local school children and things like that, they happen to be dressed in yellow and red. I wonder why that is. Nothing to do with our favorite, fast food chain clown or anything like that, is it? So yeah, it's all advertising by stealth. But one thing I will not apologise for, to be fair, in this tournament, Paul, as far as Adidas are concerned, is the invention of the Jabulani football. We took some time beforehand to make sure we got that pronunciation right. Being two boys from the northwest of England, it took some time, but this ball just disobeyed physics, would be the way I would describe it.
Yeah. So the genius behind this was that they wanted to have. To be fair, like if you think back to all of the recent World Cups, there's always been this angle about the ball, like the styling of it, the design, because everybody's got this nostalgic feeling for, like, if you think about like Mexico World Cup, Spain World Cup, the sort of the pattern on the ball was kind of like part of the romance when you think of those iconic photos. And like, we do love a good ball, don't we? But like, I think that the angle they were going for in 2010 was, let's have the most spherical ball we've ever had at a football tournament ever. So Adidas came up with like super scientific sort of like precision crafting of the Jabulani, where they did all kind of like tests of how it responded. I think they even did something as ridiculous once as like do it in like zero gravity to see how. And I remember seeing clips of it like in a wind tunnel and everything like that. But I think what is probably the fairest way to sum it up was maybe they overcooked this one or over-egged the pudding, to use an idiom. It was too round, essentially, and defied the laws of physics, the laws of the game, even. But I think you and I probably share the same opinion about this enabling a uniqueness to this tournament in terms of behaviors of the ball. And just before we started recording, you correctly called out that this allowed for unprecedented screamers. It's like it just some phenomenal goals, because the ball didn't behave like a normal football, so it's so unpredictable for goalies and also for the kick takers. I mean, look up some of the free kicks, the long distance free kicks from this World Cup, and just watch how it swerves in the air. I mean, some people hated it, players didn't like it at all, but I think it brought quite a lot of entertainment.
It really did, and you know, it like you say, there's a lot of build up around that, and we've had those balls before, like 2002, which is designed to look, you know, quite futuristic, with it being in Japan and South Korea. The German ball was very much a hark back to, you know, proper Adidas, being, you know, on the homeland and on the home turf. This one was just science gone absolutely mad and was invented by, you know, crackpots in a factory. But when, and I'm going to completely butcher this name, but watching the opening game of the World Cup between South Africa and Mexico, and when Shabalala, I'm going to say Shabalala.
That sounds much better than how I would pronounce it.
Right.
Yeah, and that was some moment as well. I know I don't want to cut you off there, but what a moment that was! Yeah,
he just rifled it into the top corner, and that's when you saw this ball just go. I'm going to do what I want, because he didn't even hit it that hard. He didn't even, I don't think he was aiming for that top corner. The ball just flew from his foot and went, you know, postage stamp straight into it. It was just absolutely incredible to see. And as you mentioned, it wasn't the first one. And if you've got yourself a spare 10 minutes at any point in the next few days, just go onto YouTube and check out on the FIFA page top 10 goals from the 2010 World Cup, because there are some absolute screamers in there. There's a really good one from the Italian chap, Quigliani, if I remember his name right. And that wasn't a screamer, but he just basically touches this ball with his big toe and it chips itself in and just lofts over the goalkeeper. And just like,
this is also as well the World Cup as well, where is it Maicon scores from like the byline, don't he, against North Korea?
Yes,
outside of his boot, and I don't think you could do that with like another football. I think, yes, I mean obviously he meant it, you know, I'm not saying that, but like I think because it's the Jabulani, that's why that goes in, because it just had that extra bit of character to it as balls go. I think, if I just pause now and go and watch the best goals from the 2010 World Cup and then come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
welcome
if you are
back.
listening to this, and if you are listening to this in North Korea, that goal didn't happen, and North Korea obviously won this World Cup as well, according to local TV reports. So that again, weird that they were there type thing. You know, they're on merit. You know, you've got to be.
Oh yeah, they're on merit. And do you know what? Like, apart from that one horrific scoreline, they gave a really good account of themselves whilst they're at that tournament. You know, like it was harsh, really. I mean, obviously, we will never know what it must have been like for those players, and you know, we've all seen those pictures of them crying. You know, it must have been immense pride. Obviously, I don't think we can really mention the North Korean team without mentioning the fans that were all coordinated. You ever see any shots in the crowd? And it was always like this small section, all immaculately dressed in the club shop, like. You know, you're talking like 10 rows of Tony Pulis's wearing and waving North Korea. You know, like think of Tony Pulis with his tracksuit, his baseball cap. But it's just, you know, it's a bunch of people from North Korea who are cheering on their team. All fantastic coordination between them as well. Like, you know, so yes, I don't know where I'm going with that. So please rescue it.
But basically, congratulations to North Korea if you're listening in North Korea, because they went home as heroes. Right,
best fans of the tournament, and obviously World Cup champions 2010.
Exactly. They can never take that away from you. The one last thing I will mention about this this tournament, and we've mentioned it before, was just prime Diego Forlan. You know, being an absolute menace in this tournament, and it was kind of obviously one where. Not that he was on his way out, but you know he was, you know, he'd done brilliant for Villarreal, and he, you know, was picking up the mantle at Atletico Madrid. But here again, alongside an emerging Luis Suarez as well, it was again quite fun just to see Uruguay, and always nice to remind ourselves that Uruguay, you know, a population of I think about 3.5 million or just over that, similar to that of Wales. going to these tournaments and just being absolutely brilliant to watch. It's a shame they don't get to finals anymore, but they always punch above the weight, and Forlan was a big part of that back then.
Oh, he was, yeah. The partnership he had with Suarez. In fact, you know what? Like, look, obviously, Luis Suarez handballing against Ghana and celebrating when they missed the penalty, and that the shithousery was off the scale, like, and it does put a dampener on it, but people should not let that distract from the positives that Uruguay. It sounds so bad, that like distract from the fact that actually Uruguay gave an incredible account of themselves. Like you say, a small nation population size, but they went about it. They were heavyweights in that tournament, weren't they? Really, the team, the performance is incredible. Really. It's you're right. It's nice to see like a team from a country who doesn't have like the largest population. I mean, obviously Uruguay hosted the first ever World Cup, a country who have a deep footballing heritage, but are competing against near neighbors Brazil, Argentina, even Chile, who have a population size much greater than theirs, or larger, I think is the correct term. But they were absolutely fantastic on a world stage. And, apart from Forlan, who was immense, they still had Suarez, they had
Godin as
Godin,
well,
and the midfielder as well, defensive midfielder, was the guy from Napoli.
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's going to annoy me now.
Yeah.
It'll come to us. It'll be really good if we could remember things about midnight tonight, but it'll come to us. And Martin Caceres at right back as well.
Yes, Caceres, and,
players of that nature, and they just tend to do it all the time. Even thinking about that game, to be fair, it was it's just all of a sudden thrown Asamoah Gyan to the front of my mind.
Yes,
which is just excellent memories. But that game was, for me, at this World Cup, Puma, and this is the last thing I'll say before we actually get back to talk about Spain, is Puma had the best kits at that World Cup, because it was kind of like that. They had the arching over the shoulders and went down the side, and all basically all the nations were matching, apart from their own colours and things like that.
On that, because I mean, obviously, we do need to get back on track, but we are one of these podcasts who likes to indulge in the nostalgia aspect of it. I don't remember seeing this particular thing at any of the World Cups since, but I remember when you got the, like they do the Panini stickers. When you got the book with that, you also got a free book that had all of the kits. I think it was like Kit Bag or something like that. One of the ones that had all the kits for all the nation, and like home, away, where you can get it. And there were some brilliant kits at that World Cup. Absolutely from Puma definitely win it, but like in general, I think it was a really good World Cup for kits. Boots as well. Like I remember Nike did, like that was the time when they did a load of boots that were like all the same color scheme but different shapes. Like you had Mercurials, Tiempos, I can't remember what the other ones are now. CTRs, were they something like that? But they were all like the color coded, so it depended on what color the heel was. When you were watching on TV, you knew exactly what type of boot that person was wearing. Like,
I remember getting the grey and orange Mercurial Vapors after seeing them at the World Cup. Going to JJB, and if you're a listener under the age of 20, JJB was a very popular sports high street football store owned by Dave Whelan, former football player. Broke his leg in an FA Cup final. I think it was his leg.
Yeah, he rarely mentions it, but that did happen.
And I remember going there and just buying them, thinking this will make me faster. It did not make me faster, but it made me look like I was going faster. So
no, you're right. I'm going to stop. Yeah, you're right. The orange ones were the Mercurial Vapors. There was a lime green ones, which I think were the CTRs, and then a light blue one, which was the Tiempos, and then I can't remember what the other one was, but back on track. Let's go.
Definitely. Do you know who did wear the Mercurial Vapors? Cesc Fabregas, famously.
Oh.
Look at how we spin this podcast right back around again. So to go back to Spain, you mentioned before, Paul, that obviously they'd been on this mega unbeaten run, 35 games it was. Euro 2008 champions. They were not just dominant at an international level. Barcelona were, one of the dominant forces at a European level. We were starting to see an influx of Spanish footballers starting to dominate the Premier League as well, namely the likes of, as the aforementioned Cesc Fabregas, Fernando Torres, etc. Xabi Alonso had been here previously before going back to Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
And everything just looked like it was going up, except from in this first game, they suffer a defeat to the hands of Switzerland, of all people. And it was quite strange because I remember watching this game and it felt like Spain were really disjointed. It felt like they were really nervous in this match. And, Gelson Fernandez basically just took a punt, and got onto the end of a through ball and slotted it past Casillas. And it was weird. We didn't expect this at all, did we?
No, not at all. It was like, the I mentioned the 35 match unbeaten run that spanned 2 years comes to an end with the first game at the next major tournament, and against a Switzerland team who were, I wouldn't say that they were like full underdogs to get out of the group, but they were certainly a team that people expected this Spain team to beat. And Gelson Fernandez is a player who I'd seen play for 2 years at Manchester City, and did not think he would be ever materialise into the player that would score a match winner at a World Cup against Spain. He wasn't a bad player, but this is above my expectation for him, or was above my expectation for him, and certainly, it was a punch on the nose for Spain. I think it's probably fair to say was a wake-up call for them. That if they were going to prove to everybody why they were the reigning European champions and why they'd come in on such a long unbeaten run and everything like that, they needed to show the mettle, which the next 2 games arguably they do.
They do, yes. So joining Spain and Switzerland in that group were Honduras, who again, this is we've picked a topic here. It's got too many tangents, Paul. I can't help myself. Honduras that had Mena Figueroa in this team and Wilson Palacios,
2 Wigan Athletic lads, yeah,
Wigan Athletic players at the World Cup. Yes, you heard that right.
Well, Wigan are on a right run here because we've just mentioned Dave Whelan and JJB Sports, who was the owner of Wigan Athletic for a long period of time, and JJB Sports, who were not only his company but the main sponsor for a long period of time for Wigan Athletic, and now 2 of their players.
It's all coming up Wigan Athletic this evening, and but obviously, as much as Honduras had those brilliant football players in the squad and some gems unearthed by Steve Bruce and co. They got put to the sword. 2 goals from David Villa, one of them an absolute beauty as well, where he's just sort of like cuts in onto his right foot and bends it round the goalkeeper. And
he's got his back to goal as he hits as well. That's well worth a watch if anybody's got time. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and again, as much as we need to say this here, we've praised Diego Forlan for being a menace in this tournament. David Villa here, who I think finishes the tournament as the 2nd top goal scorer, if I remember rightly. I think behind Forlan, but obviously, scores in every round apart from the semi-final and the final, and obviously the opening game as well. They lost 1-0, but he was brilliant in this tournament, and again. Against Chile, Villa from long distance, but then Villa turns provider for Iniesta, who, in proper Andres Iniesta style, just puts his right foot through it and just places it into the bottom corner. It's like a caress. It's not even like an absolute belting hit. It's just like oops, I'm going to put that in that corner there. And they don't scrape out the group because obviously the top 2 go through, but they go through joint top with Chile. Again, another tangent, former Wigan player and Birmingham City player. Jean Beausejour was the star for Chile in this tournament in a Puma kit. We're going to have to stop doing that. The reward for finishing top of the group, you think, would be cool, nice, easy path to the final. The route is set before us. All the second place teams tend to be the easier side to place. Not this route, Paul, and it starts with a near neighbour from back home, Portugal, in the round of 16. Cristiano Ronaldo and co. Obviously, you've got some really big starlets in that squad. You've got Deco towards the end of his time with the national side. You've got Shimao. You've got the likes of Ricardo Costa, Ricardo Carvalho, etc., etc. So this was a big test for this Spain side, who so far had sort of flattered to deceive.
Yeah, I think that's fair. People will rightly remember this era of Spain being the team that played the tiki-taka style of football. But I think it's probably fair to say that the possession element of the game is only really made possible by the defensive sort of grit. The leader at the back of that, obviously, is Carlos Puyol. And ahead of him, obviously, you got Busquets. But Iker Casillas in the middle of in the goal is a leader who is constantly communicating to the back four. But then you've got Puyol, who himself is a leader, who's communicating with the midfield, and Busquets, who's got Xabi Alonso playing in there with him alongside Iniesta and Xavi, who are just geniuses with the ball. So this is a team that has personality. It's not just a team that passes it around. I think that the tiki-taka thing is a cliche and a disrespectful sort of jibe at that sort of Spain team, because they had personality. And this game against Portugal was tightly fought. It was a gritty performance. It had to be, because Portugal were hard to break down. I think, if I remember it correctly, it's sort of like what we've seen over the last 10 years anyway with Portugal, is that Ronaldo was the talisman. And the idea was absorb pressure and try and catch opposition on the counter attack with Ronaldo, or was it Morales, the guy that was at Chelsea for a bit, I think was in the team at this time. Who was sort of playing as the link up to try and catch people on the break. And that's what they went in against Spain to do, is they were defensively compact, and they were trying to feed it through to Ronaldo. It was just after the hour mark when that Spain finally get the breakthrough. David Villa again with the goal, as you said before. And I'm thinking late on as well was Ricardo Costa sent off for Portugal.
Yeah.
Can't remember if that's before or after the goal.
It was after the goal. About 85 minutes in it was. So very close to the end. But at this point, Portugal are really chucking the kitchen sink at Spain to get an equaliser, essentially. You can see at this point where, the cool calmness of like Cristiano Ronaldo, etc., just completely ebbs away, and he's trying everything to drag his side back into it, because not that Portugal had the same expectation in there, but I think from his perspective, this was another opportunity for Portugal to give it a good go. Ronaldo wanting to prove that he is, the ultimate player, the ultimate man for that tournament. And again, going out in the round of 16, not great for Portugal's standards. So, but again, it would have been the exact same conversation if Spain had gone out. And to allude what you said to earlier, it showed the maturity and the stability that Spain had to absorb that pressure and to basically see this game out. And this is the story of that tournament, actually, because we talk about how brilliant they are at tiki-taka football, at attacking football and things like that. But actually, the way that the game developed for Portugal, the way that they controlled games, the way that they managed to basically organize themselves in these matches, winning by fine margins to get themselves to the final and giving themselves a crack at glory. It was the same against Paraguay as well in the quarterfinal. Again, 1-0, David Villa, rinse and repeat. And then into the biggest test, I would possibly say, dare I say even maybe bigger than the Netherlands at the time, Germany in the semi-final. Again, this is a Germany which has got, Philip Lahm, Thomas Muller. They've got Miroslav Klose, I think at this tournament becomes the all-time World Cup leading goal scorer, I think, if I remember rightly.
Is it the one to score at the most tournaments?
That might be it. Yeah. So something like that.
Well, no, he might do that one. He might break that record in 2014, but he broke another record at this tournament. I think you might be right about most goals at a World Cup overall. Yeah, can't remember.
And again, you know, similar to Spain at this point, kind of the way we speak about England and France nowadays. These are the two teams that have got the best squads, basically. Like you say, you've got you've got a young Mesut Ozil inside this team as well, who was capable of pure magic for this Germany side. You've got young Mario Götze coming through on the bench. Andre Schürrle before he gets a big move to Chelsea. So
Sami Khedira in midfield as well of Real Madrid at this time.
Yeah.
Galactico, I think we could class him still as, really. Would you
Oh,
say?
absolutely, yeah.
He was holding it together. Ozil was creating the opportunities. Schürrle was playing off the left wing, one quite a bit closer. Thomas Muller as well, playing in the middle, behind the striker. I can't remember who was the right side. Philip Lahm. Philip Lahm is
he was
best,
in there.
He's best as a right back because at the next World Cup he's even better, but as a defensive midfielder, isn't he?
Midfielder, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this was a big test for Spain, but they rose to the occasion, and one player rose in particular, and that was Carlos Puyol, which I think, like you say, I think this was his final tournament, if I remember rightly. But again, to get that goal for someone who has represented Spain, maybe rather reluctantly, if we was to call a spade, he is a true Catalan man. But to be the hero here, that to put them into the World Cup final, to down Germany of all teams, again showed the strength and showed how mature Spain were through this tournament. And I don't think anyone was surprised by the result, but I think it could have gone either way, couldn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so, and I think you're right in what you've said there, that it was the maturity and the composure to maintain control of the game, not through necessarily through the possession and by passing the ball and just retaining it, but by creating chances that kept the right amount of pressure on Germany at the point where Germany thought they were coming back into it. Because I think there's 20 minutes still to go when Puyol scores. Spain typically didn't score from set pieces anyway, and to beat a Germany team like this, Del Bosque had to try something different, because if you think about it, this World Cup, they played a lot of short corners, and that's something that they also do at the 2012 European Championships 2 years later, is because you're talking of a team that's not got tall. I mean, with the exception of PK and people, they haven't got tall outfield players as such.
Yeah.
In 2012, it's like David Silva, Iniesta, Juan Mata, so that was carried on from 2010, where it was short corners is the way to do, and then you build your way into the box and create a chance from there. So they tried something different, and it worked.
Yeah, Route One often goes to. I'm just looking at those tall players now. Per Mertesacker was in that squad as well, Paul.
Yeah.
Bastian Schweinsteiger, we can't forget him, and we'll get absolutely hung out to dry if we don't mention. But this is the beginning of the Toni Kroos era as well. He came on, made a name for himself at this World Cup, replacing Peter Trukowski in this lineup to play against Spain. And how many times will he come back to haunt a lot of those Barcelona players in the years to come? So we reached the crux of the matter, what we're here to talk about now, which is the World Cup final, Spain's greatest triumph. And they're up against the Netherlands. And just looking at these two sides, Paul, I'm going to name them off to here for the benefit of people at home. Starting for the Netherlands, you had Stekelenburg, you've got Gregory van der Wiel, you've got Matthijssen, who would go on to join Malaga a couple of years after this World Cup, Johnny Heitinga, former Barcelona left-back Giovanni van Bronckhorst, Mark van Bommel, who also had a brief stint at Barcelona, Nigel de Jong, Wesley Sneijder, who just left Real Madrid, Dirk Kuyt, Robin van Persie, Ian Robben, who had also just left Real Madrid to join Bayern Munich. That was a brilliantly strong Netherlands side in that classic, orange Netherlands kit. But then I just go to this starting 11 for Spain. And bearing in mind, we're not even going to mention the substitutes in this part, though. Iker Casillas, Sergio Ramos, Carlos Puyol, Gerard Piqué, Juan Capdevila, who was the only player in this starting 11 that didn't play for Real Madrid or Barcelona, played for Villarreal. Xavi, Busquets, Alonso, Iniesta, Pedro, and Villa all starting in that game. This was Vincent Del Bosque just going for it, wasn't it?
It's fantasy football stuff, isn't it? Really,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to have those players, and it is all out sort of, you know, if you're Del Bosque, you name that starting 11, and you think, just be creative, get into the final third, and express yourself. That's all you need to tell them players.
No, even just looking at the bench for Spain here, you know, this is what you get to call upon from your, you know, several substitutes: Fernando Torres, Cesc Fabregas, Jesus Navas, Raul Albiol, Carlos Macena, Victor Valdes, Juan Mata, Arbeloa, Fernando Llorente, Javi Martinez, David Silva, and Pepe Reina, just in case you need a third goalkeeper. But it's just the strength and depth in that is just stupid, isn't it? Really?
Oh yeah. You know you're blushing really, aren't you, with what you've got there? And let's be right about it. You know, I do remember thinking, like, as good as this Spain side were, and as much talent as they've got there in that squad, the way that the Netherlands were playing in this tournament, you genuinely thought the final could go either way at the time. You know, the 4-2-3-1 formation that the Netherlands had been playing. It was kind of like, you know, Spain's short passing and measured football versus a Netherlands team that were a bit more rock and roll. You know, they had a bit of zip to the play with Robin and Schneider in particular, who were creating the chances. But they had that sort of like that ability to punch with, you know, or kick, perhaps is the right pun, with the likes of De Jong in midfield. They had a, you kind of thought, like, if it comes down to it, it'll either be that Spain outcreate the Netherlands, or the Netherlands will outdo Spain in the physical game and create a chance with a bit of pace that the relatively or comparatively slow Spanish defense can't catch on the counter attack. That's how, you know, if I think before the game you'd maybe expect it to have played out, but it becomes almost an inverse of one another. You know, that these two teams, when the you know, the whistle goes and the game kicks off, you know, we'll get into it, but like it's actually quite a brutal and intense game of football, and everybody will remember the still image of Xabi Alonso's chest being warped around the boot of Nigel de Jong. But I would say that in this particular game, I think, and I don't want to upset anyone, but I think physically Spain gave as good as they got. You know, it was a game. I mean, statistically, it is the dirtiest World Cup game or final ever. You know, 14 yellow cards and 1 red card. It was Johnny Heitinger who got sent off, wasn't it? But, you know, whilst Spain had a lot of the possession and they did struggle to break the Netherlands down, it wasn't the same Spain that we'd seen in the games before, with the short passing and the creativity and the patient play. It was a case of we'll perhaps played longer balls than they did in some of the earlier games, whilst they were still trying to find a breakthrough, or particularly when they were pushing in that sort of, like, you know, final 15 minutes of the first half and maybe middle 15 minutes of the second half in particular. They were playing longer passes than they normally would, and when it came to losing possession, they were very quick to go with what we now perhaps refer to as tactical fouls.
You know, I think a big part of me for this when I recall back the way, because again, the Netherlands were also another side who, you know, very much knew how to play football during this tournament. You know, they've got some of the more exciting, creative talents in the tournament. You look at, you know, Wesley Sneijder, who, you know, just that summer had just won the Champions League with Inter Milan, for example, and he was a key part of that. And, you know, he's a very creative player. Ian Robin, who, you know, possesses more pace than probably anyone else at that tournament. And there was, you know, a couple of times in that first half where he broke through, and it was down to Iker Casillas to basically save Spain in that scenario from going behind quite a few times. What I think the Netherlands did really well, though, when it came down to basically it becoming a bar fight, they both lowered their standards, and I think the Netherlands, gave it as much as they did. But I think you're absolutely right. Spain, despite the fact they came away from their usual game plan, managed to hold on to it a bit more. They managed to give as good as they got, like you said. And ultimately, it was always going to be down to who would blink first. That's ultimately what it came down to. And I see no disparity in the fact, as you've mentioned, Johnny Heitinger gets sent off in the 110th minute, I think it was, and then 5 minutes later, Spain finally find the breakthrough. There was plenty that managed to go before it. The Netherlands managed to keep David Villa very, very quiet. We've already spoken about in this tournament how prolific he was. In this game, he was non-existent, and that pains me to say. But then the fact you can then call upon Fernando Torres to come in to replace him, is a bit of an ace up your sleeve. But again, he was kept very, very quiet. And, for me, the key moment comes when Heitinga gets sent off. The Netherlands go down to that 10 men and they struggle to basically backfill. And it just opens up that opportunity for Andres Iniesta. And, if you used to ask Iniesta, who's probably got a trophy cabinet as big as my house, is this the greatest moment of your career? Scoring that goal in a World Cup final in 4 minutes from the end, he's gonna say yes, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, do you know? I don't. It sounds again like we're being a bit cliche here, but this is like when people talk about a boxing match that goes like the full 15 rounds, and if it wasn't for Heitinger's red card, like it would definitely have gone to penalties. There was just nothing in between the two teams, but then you've got a ball that comes through to Iniesta, who we all remember him as being a great player. But this is probably the only goal. If you ever said, "What's your favorite Iniesta goal?" Like, you remember this one because of it being the winner in a World Cup. But I don't think you can remember too many others of him. I mean, obviously there's a couple from Barca, but this is the one. This is the goal, and like, there's just this. Sometimes you're in a stadium and you get like a last minute winner or a late goal, right? There's a different reaction from the crowd. You hear it like there's like that intake of breath. I can think of it from, being in the stadium when Aguero scores. I remember that that is a different goal sound from the crowd. Vincent Kompany's goal against Leicester. Now you can hear that one on telly because instead of hearing the usual you kind of hear a whoa before it, like what just happened. And I think with Iniesta's goal, there is like a, what do you call it, like a pregnant pause? That you can hear from through your television set from South Africa to wherever you're watching it, where it's like has that happened? Has it fought? Does it count? And what a moment he reels away, doesn't he? He takes his shirt off and he's got a personal message to I think it's one of his friends also. I can't remember now. But it's, if you want it to fall to someone, you probably, out of all of those wonderful players within the Spain team, I don't know if he'd be your first pick, but yeah, there we go.
I think it demonstrated what his job was in that team, because, like you say, he wasn't a striker. He wasn't necessarily the midfielder that we know him to be either. He was very much the conduit in between the two. And as you said, there is no mistake here. He is sat in that gap where Johnny Heitinger filled it 5 minutes earlier. And when the ball rolls through to him, there is that sense of, oh, was that offside? Or was he just off? And then when the flag stays down, you're like, bloody hell, they've done it. And I think there was an outpouring at this point, because I think there is a general consensus that the Netherlands tried to kick their way to victory in this game. And everyone was a bit like, oh, hey, we like Spain. Spain's got some of the best players, and we quite enjoy this. And I think it, just encapsulates an excellent decade for Spanish football, is probably the way I would describe it. Because we saw the turn of the millennium, and both Real Madrid and Barcelona on a international level were doing okay, and then obviously you get the Real Madrid Champions League win, and then you start to get the era of dominance from Barcelona and the re-emergence of Real Madrid with the Galacticos and things like that. And this just sort of like rounded that off really quite nicely, didn't it? With Spain basically are the naughties of football.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, it felt right, didn't it? And they go on to not only lift this, and it's the first ever World Cup that Spain win. And I think, are they the first European nation to win the World Cup in a World Cup that takes place outside of the continent of Europe as well, which I think was a talking point before the final.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
that's correct. Yeah,
the Netherlands had reached 2 World Cup finals previously and lost. I remember that being a big talking point, and then it being like, well, whoever wins it is the first European side to win it outside of Europe. And I think there's only Germany that have done it since, haven't they? Because Germany did it in 2014.
in Brazil,
yeah. But it felt like, right, anybody who was watching Spanish football at the time, or watching the Champions League at the time, you knew how good these players were, and it just kind of felt like, after seeing them be so impressive in 2008, and then the way that they'd gone about at club level and obviously in this tournament, there was no arguing about it that the Spanish were the best footballing nation on earth at this point in time, in my opinion. And it is, it's the middle trophy in the historic sort of treble run that they have, because it's 2008, 2010, 2012, unprecedented levels of win. But even without that, this was just, you kind of just, everybody knew that this was the best footballing nation on the planet at the time, I think.
Yeah, and I think it got rid of a few word I'm trying to use here, sort of like monkeys on the back, so to speak, in terms of Spain being this premier football nation, so to speak. Even at the time, you could argue that La Liga was just behind the Premier League in terms of quality and in terms of attraction, and obviously the clubs, the dominance of the Spanish teams, in Europe, for example. And it was that moment where I think, dare I say, Spanish football for a moment in time eclipsed British football as a product, as a team, as a something that people wanted to watch, and they could finally claim, we've got the best league in the world, we've got the best teams in the world, we've got the best team in the world as well. And obviously, as you've already mentioned, they go on to win Euro 2012, but I think at that point as well, that is still part of this. But after that, we're only sort of starting to see the re-emergence of Spanish dominance, in continental football and in world football as well. And we will be very interested to see how they get on in North America in 2026. Given that we've got so many good teams right now, and even back then, we were only talking maybe about a couple that could challenge their superiority in the forms of like Germany. Brazil were pretty at that time. Argentina was still very much like a nervous nation. They weren't really doing too much. England were not to be seen in South Africa, really. They didn't go home early, but obviously they went home to the goal from Frank Lampard, and Germany knocked them out. So,
I think that's a good point, and bearing in mind that the reigning world champions going into this tournament were Italy, and am I right in thinking they didn't finish bottom of the group, but they went home very early.
Yeah, I think so. You know what? I think I would struggle to say whether they actually
was this the one where it was like it's a disgrace, or they left. I can't remember that, because I remember
but they finished below New Zealand in their group. That's the disgrace.
Yeah.
Finished on 2 points, and obviously the reigning champions, and then Fabio Cannavaro has to bring the trophy out at Soccer City for the World Cup final as well, which is probably more pain to it. But yeah, it's I'm just looking at the groups now. North Korea in a group with Portugal, Brazil, and the Ivory Coast. That's just mad. That's just absolutely crazy. No wonder they didn't win the World Cup. But I think this is an era that, especially us as people who do focus on, football nostalgia, do focus on the better era of Spanish football. This is something that we'll remember where we were when we were watching this game. We were all sat at home in front of the telly. It was on the BBC, and we were watching the best Spain side you're ever going to see, probably. And even now, when we look at obviously the Spain side that have won the Euros recently, we look at the Spain side as it is. It draws in a wider church from the pool of players that they've got, and they are very, very good. But they'll never be the Spain side that's got Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, Villa, Iker Casillas, Sergio Ramos in it. Carlos Puyol, Fernando Torres. It's never going to be that side ever again, is it?
No. And that's the thing, is like you mentioned Torres at the end there. I'm thinking you're not going to have a Spain side now that can afford to bench the likes of Fernando Torres again. I don't think,
a young David Silva as well, who's just about to make the move to Manchester City, and Juan Mata in that on the bench as well. That caliber of football player.
That's the thing, that summer. So David Villa has just moved to Barcelona. Cesc Fabregas moves to Barcelona, but David Villa moves from Valencia, where Juan Mata and David Silva were. And we are going to talk about that Valencia team at some point in the future, aren't we? Because I know we've already done an episode on Valencia. That was our first episode, which if you've not listened, go back and listen to. But that was about a different Valencia team. But I think at some point we need to have a look at the Valencia team of the probably 2007 to 2010, because some of them are in this squad that go on to win the World Cup, but obviously that Valencia team didn't really win anything. So that's a mystery that we'll explore at another time.
It will, and I am sad to say, Paul, this is now the end of Series 1. Are we going to make a series? Should we be that guy? I don't know.
I think we should. It's easier, isn't it? Because then it allows us to have a break in between to go on holiday, or to recharge our batteries or whatever, or even just decide to have a break in between. But yeah, I don't know. Seasons, don't know.
Exactly. Well, this is the end of season 1. I think I prefer seasons, So we'll call it season 1, and we're going out on high with Spain winning the World Cup 15 years ago today. If you're listening on day of release, if you're not, and you are enjoying our plethora of back catalogue items, do check out. We've got the Valencia episode, we've got a Depor episode, we've got interviews with Miguel Pereira, we've got good friend of Hop, Mad Harrison, doing greatest Brazilian 11s. We've got it all. So enjoy yourself over summer. Paul, enjoy Oasis this weekend as well. I'm incredibly jealous of you for that. But more importantly, enjoy your holiday in Spain. If you can take in some football, please do. I think there's a fair bit going on in and around the Murcia, Alicante region. So, maybe send the family off for a day by the sea. You get yourself into a stadium. I, for one, I know I'm going to watch Malaga against Oxford in Oxford in a couple of weeks' time. And then I'm hopefully going to be watching Malaga against Real Betis in the Costa del Sol Trophy. So a chance to see Isco back and Manuel Pellegrini back at La Rosaleda. And but for now, we put El Partido into a little slight slumber. So again, Paul, thank you very much for your company this season. It's been absolutely great to get this podcast up and going.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure. It's I've really enjoyed it, and look, we're going to get some rest, aren't we? We're going to, as you say, and enjoy ourselves, and we're going to come back, and be even more. I don't know what's the word, energetic. I don't know. We're going to come back stronger, to use a cliche, to use a podcasting cliche. We'll be back stronger, won't we?
We'll be back stronger. And again, obviously, as per usual, thank you very much for you guys listening at home, for all the feedback you've given us, for all the ideas that you're providing us as well. Social media will still continue throughout the summer, so keep your eye out for those if you just want to see some really cool pictures of football players from the noughties and 90s. It's a bit of fun for us to do that. And then, like I say, we'll be back after the second week in August. And like I say, we will be back with a band. But for now, we'll bid you a good day. Thank you very much, and hasta luego.